Hey, it's Sarah Jane from Access Your True Nature. And I know I've been a little missing in action for a couple of days. I have been deeply immersed in some private work with some of my clients. And I had an eye operation last Tuesday, which some of you know brought up a lot of fear for me. So here I am. I just thought I'd pop in and just share with you something that's been coming up a lot for myself and for some of my clients. Thank you for the hearts. Hi Gail, lovely to see you here. If you see me looking away, I've actually got two screens going at the moment, so I'm not paying attention to you. I promise I am, and I hope you join this conversation and I hope you find it helpful. I'm playing with a filter on this. It's quite funky. Facebook are coming up with some great stuff. Hi Paul, nice to see you. So I wanted to talk today about manipulation, lies, lines, and manipulation, and how people often, without sometimes even knowing it, use manipulation in a very subtle form. And for those of you that don't know me, you know that I work with healing trauma from a lot of the time from adverse childhood experiences, so that you can really live fulfilled and deeply happy. And remember who you are, just to return to loving what is. And I know that there's so many people that I've been speaking to lately that have been feeling very confused about just all the upheavals, whether it's personal, whether it's governments in Cape Town, and I mean in South Africa last Friday with this whole big rally for raising consciousness in our governments, and just not really knowing what to do and feeling like they're being totally pulled apart. And it feels to me like it's a way that we're learning to find a new way of being in our lives that is much more from allowance, much more from flow and less from force, less of those old shifty kind of paradigms. So I don't know if you can relate to that, but recently I went through one of those huge personal upheavals myself, and my world really felt like it had been turning upside down, and I felt trapped by how much I was being triggered, and how all these old emotions that I was really good at, and what I teach others to do, to just resolve stress and heal from themselves, it was just coming at me from nowhere. And now sort of settling into this integration of all this new insight, I wanted to just share a little bit about these sort of 8 common things that I see reoccurring over and over again, so that maybe if you identify them in your own life, you can actually start to create more flow and less force in your life. And if you have ever lived with someone who is a narcissist, who uses intimidation or just a total lack of empathy, or lies all the time, or is gaslighting you, my question really is to look at, what are the triggers, what's underneath the triggers, what are the fears that are holding you in this, what's happening in your body, and how can you start to recognize these traits. Whether it's the government or your partner or your boss, it's still abuse, it's still trauma, because so many people that come into my practice say to me they're not traumatized, that they've actually had a really good life, or they haven't been traumatized, but in some way just coming through the birth canal is defined as trauma. So we're not always looking at the big traumas. We're looking at the sort of chronic, unpredictable, toxic daily stresses that can sometimes show up as anxiety or panic attacks, or just a feeling of being off. So my question to you, and I would love you to type that in the comments, is how do you move through it? Because it's really important to heal from this abuse, whether it's just that uneasy feeling, or it's a really big panic attack. Maybe you have constant bouts of illnesses or colds that you just can't seem to kick. And what is happening? What is happening in your body is a really important part of this, because I've noticed, and I noticed with my client again, who sort of came with some very physical symptoms of panic attacks and constant breakouts of hives and irritable bowel syndrome, that if we're not integrating what we know You know, so identifying your triggers, identifying the places where you're being manipulated. If we're not integrating it in a way, how do we actually move through not disassociating, can't get my words out today, from the hurt and the sadness and the anger that comes up? And, you know, why can we often have our loved ones see that disconnect in ourselves, and yet despite our best efforts, they're blind spots, they're inaccessible to us to actually even start to resolve, and a lot of defensiveness comes up, a lot of force comes up there, because underneath it, I love what Brene Brown says, that underneath most shame, underneath most defensive systems, there's always perfectionism lurking. So, you know, what is that primary thought that gets triggered in you, that if you just do things, or if you just give your wants and your desires up, and you just become the people pleaser, or you constantly work harder, or that addiction is perfectionism or workaholism or any of that you can somehow avoid or minimize the pain. You know, we're always trying to avoid pain and move toward pleasure. So however you choose to define that sort of form of perfection in your own life, I really wanted to just start a conversation today in seeing how we can move through that when you fail to meet your own impossible standards. You know, when we keep looping back into shame, and I've written a blog about this, which you should be getting in your inbox probably tomorrow, Wednesday, that really looks at where are you holding yourself in these impossibly high standards, that it doesn't matter what you do, you just never seem to feel like you're enough or be enough. And it always surprises me how early on this starts. I saw a beautiful young girl today, and just in passing, she was saying she doesn't seem to ever be enough for her parents. She just doesn't seem like she's ever doing enough or is good enough or anything else. So let's change that, shall we? Constant thoughts about, yeah, it does, Kelly. And, you know, I'm hoping that today, and I would love to know when you try some of these things, or you start to identify some of this, you can look at, you know, even though we can't change what's happened to us, we can definitely change how we trance through it. Hi, Carol, nice to see you here. So that we can stop being triggered, you know, because we want to stop the cycle of abuse. We want to stop being triggered. We want to stop shutting ourselves down. And really this is happening at the level of the nervous system. And when we are constantly judging ourselves, when we're constantly thinking that we're not doing enough, and I know a lot of you can relate to this, that's where we start looping in this pattern of shame, and we become more disconnected and more distant from our own truth. And this is where, if you've had a narcissist, or you've had a very controlling, sort of a codependent relationship with somebody that is dominating, we're always apologizing for things that we haven't done wrong, and we either become avoidant, or we go into another kind of shutdown on our nervous system, and we never really get to the root cause of what's causing that dis-ease, remember, which is just the opposite of easy, to get to look at the blind spots, because they're blind. And this is really where I show up in my work, and why my work is so important to me, is that I want you to fall back in love with your lives. I want you to fall back in love with yourselves and be able to say no. And you can't if you don't know that it's there, right? We can't change what we don't acknowledge. So identifying and recognizing where we're actually going into apologizing, and where we're being manipulated or lied to, is a very good place to start rebooting your nervous system, and actually change the circuitry, so the wiring in your brain, which changes everything from a very cellular level, because you're now starting to uncover the blind spots, and doing this in a way that you start to not just cope with trauma, but you learn to feel again. You can't heal what you don't feel. So, you know, you have to learn to use some compassion, tread kindly and gently on yourself, so that you can move into a life that's really connected to your truth. And remember, what's true for you doesn't have to be true for anybody else. So I know I feel like I'm rambling a little bit today, but I really want you to know that you can change this, and it really starts by informing and educating yourself of when things are being projected at you and where you're going into assumption because you're being triggered, so that you get to create that secure attachment for yourself. So if you've ever sort of felt manipulated into doing or saying something that's maybe very out of character for yourself, or you're kind of sucking it up or biting your tongue, or you're enduring these sort of regular insults and rejections, or maybe you just kind of feel violated in some way. What did you say, Gail? Want to stop feeling trapped? Yeah. And you know, sadness is always such a, I can totally relate to that. You know, when we're out of alignment, and that really I asked a question earlier today about, you know, are you living under the sun or are you living in the sun? And that really is the difference between that sort of disassociation of life happening to you, and actually looking at how can you bring more of the light into the blind spots, and look at where you are forcing yourself to be something that you're not. And that really for me is always a good marker, a really good indicator of where you are making yourself wrong, trying to be something that you're not, and you're out of alignment. Hello, Elsa B. Ellie's beautiful woman here. You know, when we're out of alignment, you can't have flow, right? When you start giving yourself up and you start living from force rather than flow, a lot of times depression is a very good indicator. The sadness there is just like, where did I lose myself? Where did I forget what I wanted? Where did I give up asking for what I want, and also being able to say no? So having those strong boundaries. And, you know, whatever you call it, again, those feelings a lot of the time of depression in what I wanted to share with you today on these sort of 8 indicators of where you're apologizing for things that actually aren't yours to apologize for, is emotional abuse. And maybe there's some victimology going on there for you, because abuse isn't just physical. There's so many forms of abuse or trauma, and that, you know, it's the sexual, the financial, the emotional, the mental, and the verbal. But it's more that, like I said, it's the little insidious, subtle forms, and oftentimes it shows up in narcissistic relationships. It certainly did in mine, where it was constant. So it becomes your new normal. You acclimatize and you adjust and you pivot all the time to what's coming at you, and that's one of the classic signs, and maybe I'll do another Facebook Live about that soon, of being under that spell of a narcissist, right? There's always narcissistic abuse going on some level, and I don't even like using that word, because I think it's become sort of like a buzzword in life transformation, and I think it's important to get that clear, that, you know, it often just starts as a very casual comment, you know, about anything, just an opinion that's kind of snarky, you know, like, oh, you know, you don't clean the car, so you're not very clean, or it's just little remarks that are taken very out of context with the one that's abusing, and there's a hurt to it, there's a meanness to it, that the abuser, let's just call it that for today, but your abuser is trying to show you that they disapprove of you, of your behavior, and you start to doubt yourself, and then you try and explain that wasn't your intention, or, you know, just because I don't clean my car, it doesn't mean that I don't respect the car or respect you or whatever it is, and you end up feeling totally paralyzed, like you're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't, and there's a helplessness to it. And what happened with me was I started thinking I was losing my mind, because I know I didn't say that, but by the time he was finished his subtleties for the day, let's just call him that, I started to doubt if it had even happened or not. You know, you start feeling like you're going crazy. And abuse can come in many disguises. So I wanted to just give you a few of the very common sort of manipulations, the tactics that someone that's trying to have control over you. And how do they do that? Well, they start to make you doubt. They start to do all sorts of things. And if you just sort of recognize any of these, either, you know, please reach out and get some support, or just knowing them, you can acknowledge them when they're happening to you, and then you get to move away instead of getting into forcing and defending yourself or shutting yourself down on your nervous system. And this may help somebody. So if you know somebody that you think may be under some victimology of emotional or mental trauma or abuse, please share this video with them and tell them that they're not alone, because I think that's the biggest part in all of this is a lot of times when you're being abused mentally or emotionally or psycho-spiritually, there is already a pattern of separation. You've already kind of been taken out of your support system, and that was certainly the case in my experience. Was there was separation was already made. The friends went away, people weren't told they weren't welcome, and you feel very alone. So it's really important to get support so that you know that you aren't alone, because I think that's part of the paralyzing fear of it. So I just wanted to work through, give you these 8 quickly, and if you're interested in a PDF, I haven't done a lead page or a fancy opt-in or anything else for this. If you'd like the PDF of these sort of 8 common signs of manipulation and mental abuse, just PM me or message me, and I'll be happy to send them to you. So and you'll probably recognize some of these because they're you know, it's not rocket science. So the first one's always rage, you know, and we're talking about pathological anger, not healthy anger. It's very intense. It sort of comes out of nowhere. My father was a very abusive drunk, so it was kind of like you're holding your breath and you're treading on eggshells and you're waiting for the next shoe to drop. You know, everything's just too quiet or too calm, and that's that sort of startle effect of what are you doing, and you go straight into that trigger of knowing that you don't feel safe, that your life is in threat, and it's often a startle. There's a big storm coming. It's often a very it's a startle effect, you know, like little children when they get a fright. There's that startle effect when they sort of wake up, because as babies, that's one of the 2 things that we're afraid of, which is falling. So if you can remember that when you're a child, that fear of falling, it really shocks you. So there's a shock and trauma system that gets activated, and it makes you either very compliant because you shut down or you freeze, and that's the silence. So you actually feel like you can't speak up for yourself. And often, again, this goes back into some experience or story from your childhood. So, you know, rage is one of the ones. It's just like you don't see it coming, and there is an absolute fright and startle effect. The second one is what's called gaslighting in psychology terms, and that really is what it is. You know, definition of gaslighting is really that place where the person that's trying to control you or manipulate you or dominate you or they lie about their past. So they make you in the role of the victim really start to doubt your memory. You know, it's just like, oh my God, did I screw it up? I mean, how did I not remember that past? And it brings up doubt. There's you like I said earlier, you start to think you're going mad, and that you're losing your mind, and there's always like this sort of insidious, sometimes it's not so subtle, but there's always this claim that gives evidence to wrong behavior in the past. So they'll point out that you did that before, or remember that time when, and that just causes you to doubt the truth of what really happened in the experience even more, and you start to question what you just said a minute ago. You really, really don't know what's a lie and what's true anymore. The third one is what I like to call the stare, and you know, that's a very sort of intensely controlling stare, and there's no feeling behind it. So, you know, it's sort of that scare tactic of intimidation, and I see you, and I remember my ex-husband used to do that really, really well. And again, this is always a trigger off of unresolved trauma that you might have had in the past, where you really go into that deer in the headlights freeze. So again, there's a disassociation or shutdown because you're feeling intimidated. You're not feeling safe in that. And oftentimes what happens if you are on the receiving end of that is that, again, you'll go into muted. You won't be able to stand up for yourself. You can't speak up for yourself because you're literally paralyzed, right? In your nervous system is just starting to shut down, and oftentimes this is going to trigger your digestion to shut down, because that's one of the first things your nervous system does when your life is in feeling threatened. And remember, the subconscious mind, the nervous system, doesn't know the difference between real abuse, physical abuse, or whether it's abuse you're watching on the television screen, or in a story that somebody's telling you. It's exactly the same. For your nervous system, it doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. So, you know, these are all intimidating tactics that get you to be compliant and be easily controlled. And if you think about it right now, it's kind of what a lot of the governments are doing at the moment. Where am I? Number 4 is that sort of silent treatment. So again, if you were a child that had a parent that used to punish you or make you feel that you weren't loved, that was one of the ways that you would go into people pleasing or overgiving as a child, because you were wanting to get their attention and they were giving you the cold shoulder or the silent treatment. So they just totally ignore you, because for a child, for us as mammals, to be cast out or separated from our tribe is a very dangerous thing out in the wild. And again, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between perceived threat, a real famine, and a famine in your head, because you're worrying about how you're going to pay the rent, or where's the money going to come to put food on the table, or whatever it is going on for you. So the silent treatment is really that punishment, right? When we look at punishment and reward, it's not a good thing. So if you're not communicating as part of a tribe, you don't know where danger's coming. It's very much a prey aspect of horses, is that we have to have open communication all the time to be able to know, am I safe here, or is there something that I need to be looking out for? And obviously this ripples down into affecting your immune system and everything else in your digestion and all the other physical symptoms that show up when we're in shutdown on the nervous system. So silent treatment, something else where, you know, it's agony. I remember as a child that was the most agonizing thing, was to be ignored, to have that silent treatment. And then what the abuser normally does is they then let you off the hook, you know, by demanding an apology, or there's always an ultimatum that unless you change, they're going to put you under more of that punishment. So you have to keep modifying your behavior, and they want you to apologize for something that you shouldn't be saying sorry for. You never did anything wrong in the first place, and it's very confusing as a child. And this is really where we set up our unconscious commitments and the patterns that take us later into life, which is often why adverse childhood experiences, you think you're over them as a child, but they'll show up 20 or 30 years later in your adult life as some kind of chronic disease, or a recurring pattern of abuse with finances, or choosing, you know, partners that are not kind and not loving, because this hasn't been resolved. So that silent treatment, I think, is one of the ones that we probably can all relate to at some point in our life, from a teacher or a friend or a primary caregiver. And they also, the people that use that kind of manipulation, they also have a history of sort of cutting other people out of their lives permanently over really small things. It's just totally irrational, but they'll cut them out and they'll never talk to that person again. It's just a constant break, and that, for someone watching or witnessing that, is a very scary thing to do. The other one is projections. I kind of talked about that earlier. It's just like when they dump their issues onto you, as if you're the one that's to blame for it. It's all your fault that this happened. It's your fault that I went into a flying fit of rage because you, my power is going low, so I'm going to cut this short, try and get through this quickly. But it's kind of like, you made me do it because you pushed my buttons. Nobody pushes your buttons. Nobody gets to choose what you're choosing other than you. So if you can see these manipulations, then you get to choose whether you're going to defend, or whether you're going to walk away, or whether you're going to let them be right and you get to be free and you tell them what they want. You're right, but you don't buy it. You don't believe it. You just do whatever's going to work out in more flow for you and not force. So that's the projection of, and I cover this in my shadow dancing two-part classes, of being able to see your blind spots, being able to see the truth in any situation. So this works great for all relationships, to be able to see, where are you projecting and where are people projecting their stuff on you, so that you get to know what's true and right for you, and then take the action steps that's going to work for you. And again, this really comes from honoring and allowing you to own your own truth and say yes to you, even if the other person is going to go into some of these manipulations. And most of the times when we start to change this, people that are closest to you do up their ante. They have to find another way to manipulate you. And how do they do that? Well, if rejection doesn't work anymore, and this, for instance, with narcissistic mental abusers, a lot of the time they'll accuse their partner or the person they love of lying, when they've actually been a liar. So that's the projection. They distort and twist and manipulate the truth, so that you then go into doubting. What did I do wrong? And then you can't get it out of your mind, and that goes into these addictive sort of pattern repeats that just get you nowhere and have you up at night and your digestion in a mess, and you can't sleep, and all the other physical stuff comes along. Or they'll make you feel guilty of doing something when they've actually been the one that's doing it. So it creates a lot of confusion, and that's when you really start to doubt yourself, especially if you're highly sensitive empaths, which I know most of my tribe are. You're very sensitive, and that brings up a whole lot of other different interesting dynamics, especially if you're involved with a very controlling or narcissistic partner. So you also, oftentimes you'll find that they twist the truth. So when they're confronted, they'll twist it around and they'll blame you for their actions. So they won't accept responsibility for their behaviors, and they'll insist again that you're wrong and you need to apologize, or you need to modify your behavior so that they can be right. So I always say, let them be right and you get to be free, but don't buy it. No, it's just a story and it's not your story, so that it no longer affects you. And this is how you really start to transform and start loving yourself more, because you can just see and recognize it for what it is. And it can be very profoundly powerful when you actually start to look at what's really going on, and not just in the real time, but what's going on underneath the surface of why you go back into those old patterns of fight and flight. Because when you do this, your immune system doesn't get triggered. So you're not going to have prolonged health issues, right? You're going to heal a lot faster because you're not activating your nervous system to tell your immune system that there's something that it needs to fight, and or that there's, you know, famine coming, or there's something to be afraid of. And you're going to improve your gut health, you know, that you're going to have good regular bowel movements, or you'll stop going in. What I see a lot with my clients is either they're constipated or their stomach groans. So it's this holding and this letting go that they feel totally out of control with. And I often say diarrhea, and I know, yes, I talk a lot about poo in my practice because it's a really important part of looking at how your life is working. You know, is the bottom falling out of your life? If you've got IBS, or you constantly have a runny stomach, you want to look at the emotional, mental component of what's actually triggering you to think that you have no control over your life. And I love talking about this stuff, but just for now, just know that the twisting, and the all goes with the projection. So they'll project and they'll twist, and again, it's all to get you into a place where you start doubting what you know. It's very confusing. And it's not a very good place to be. So it's making sense. Give me some love, give me some hearts if you're finding this valuable, because I know I kind of get into the work, and I really appreciate you being here. So tell me if this is valuable. Give me some hearts, give me some love. Tell me if this is making sense, and maybe if you can identify some of this either that you're doing that you'd like to change, thank you, or that you see someone in your life doing that maybe is contributing to you feeling like you're not enough, or you're sad, or you're depressed. So, you know, to the twisting and the contortions, or it's a manipulation again. So a lot of time, if you confront the person and you just, you know, when you're standing in your strength and you're saying, actually, you know what, that isn't the truth, or this is not force. This is where you start to use the shadow work and learn how to use open, healthy communication. A lot of times when you actually say, actually, did you notice that you're doing that, or what you just did didn't make me feel good, or whatever it is, they'll twist it around and they'll blame you for their actions again. So can you see how they're all very intertwined, and it all sort of comes from the same place, where there's a refusal to acknowledge their part in it, or they don't take responsibility for their behaviors, and they'll always insist and blame and shame and make the other person wrong, right? They'll make you wrong, and you end up saying sorry for something that you actually didn't do. So, you know, that really leads into the twisting of the truth is part of that manipulation. You know, a favorite manipulation tactic for a narcissist is to make you feel afraid, you know, of the worst, you know, the worst thing in the world is going to happen, like they're going to leave you, so it'll be threats, or, you know, and it'll be a place where they know you have a softness or a sensitivity or a weakness. Hey, Carol, good. Yeah, they are. And really what we're trying to do is get people, well, what I try and do in my work, and why this really matters to me, is because all the patterns and processes that come from other types and variations of trauma are often deeply rooted in the psyche of your pre-7-year-old. Sometimes it goes back into other past lifetimes. So when we can get to the root cause of where this main belief system comes from, and heal and integrate that on a cellular level, then all the other like if you think of it like a little virus, that's your main one, there's always a cluster of the other various experiences and traumas, and they all collapse when you actually go in and you pull that main one and integrate it into an empowered, safe place of attachment for your child parts. So that you're no longer at the on the receiving end of a lot of these kind of behaviors that constantly keep showing up, because the child is running your life from that place of, if I just do what I'm told, then I'm going to be safe, or if I just do what the other person wants, then I won't be abandoned or rejected. So manipulation, especially from a narcissist, will really hurt you where they know you're most vulnerable. And that's often why you'll find a very sensitive, empathetic person will hook up in a relationship, whether that's a boss or a partner or a love relationship, because it's what they know. So the sooner we educate ourselves and we can make informed choices, and that's where, for me, healing at the level of the nervous system is so important, because you have nothing to be sorry for. There is nothing for you to apologize for, but they will always make you feel like there is. So that's that shame Brene Brown talks about, that underneath most of perfectionistic behaviors, under the sort of codependent relationship, oftentimes you'll just find this dear, sweet little being, this little child that's just doing her best to keep you safe, and you need to step up into the role of the secure adult, right? That is not going to leave her, so that she knows that she doesn't have to run your life from that place again, because that is one of our biggest fears as mammals, is the fear of abandonment. And the manipulations nowadays go into infidelity or rejection on another scale. So that's number 7. Yeah, and there's always going to be denial in this. I know this is a big topic for just 8 tiny steps on a Monday night, and it's heavy, but I don't do band-aiding, and a lot of this work doesn't feel comfortable. I always say your soul, your great spirit, doesn't care if it's inconvenient. Your ego cares about that, and we have to go to those uncomfortable places. It doesn't have to be painful, but we need to be able to look at them and identify them so that we can actually move into a more empowered place, and be able to express ourselves and love ourselves from there, so that we're no longer under the control of the lies, the lines, and the manipulations of other people who want you to do what they want you to do, right? You're the only one who gets to say yes to you. And that's what I want to do, is help strong, powerful, sensitive women like you remember what lights you up, what gives you joy, and what makes you have that sense of peace and fulfillment, so that you can really fall in love with your life again. So it really just comes back to loving yourself enough to know that your beliefs were your beliefs, and they got you where you are today. They're not right or wrong. They're not negative. They were beliefs, and you don't need them anymore. So just know, I think I've done all 6, 8, 7. Hang on, let me just think about this. So are there any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to know? Because I'm just going to wrap up. My battery's about to die. So just remember, manipulation is always a control tactic to get you to align and agree, or resist or react, right? They're pushing your buttons, but they're not pushing them. The buttons are there, and they're just bringing it up to the surface, because maybe you're in a place where you're strong enough now to resolve them and create that place of safety for yourself. So just know, when people are manipulating, it's not wrong. They're doing what they need to do to get what they want, and it's not about the blaming or the shaming or making anyone wrong. It's just about going, oh, there you go, what a great manipulation, thanks but no thanks, and then you get to walk away without stressing yourself up, and you get out of that cycle of abuse. Okay, so that's probably the last one that there is that victim card. When all else fails, the classic narcissist, the classic controller, will always play the victim card, right? Then they'll start pushing the other buttons to try and get you to feel sorry for them. They want the sympathy, so that they can control you even more. And that's where we find ourselves saying, I'm sorry all the time. I'm like, you have nothing to be sorry for. Hello, Margot. So that is my Monday daily dose of True Nature Medicine for you. I hope you found that helpful. Just recognize them so that you know that there's nothing to prove, nothing to hide, nothing to apologize for, and you get to really strengthen into your yes and also to know your no, so that you can put in much stronger anchors. And sometimes just knowing that that's what's happening gives you the anchor to actually turn it around and create that sense of safety for yourself without giving yourself up. So love yourself enough to do that, because you are so loved, you are enough, and I want you to really stand in your light and be happy. So I hope that was helpful. I wish you a beautiful Monday night or day wherever you are, and I'll probably jump on during the week. My daughter's away at camp, so I have my evenings to myself. I don't have to do dinners or anything else, and I would love to go deeper into some of these. So let me know what you want, and I would be happy to show up and share with you what I know about that. And if you'd like more information, like I said, of how you can resolve from your childhood traumas, if you have blind spots, if you're having triggers and you're kind of feeling like you don't know where to start, give me a message or reach out to me at Access Your True Nature. And if you don't know where else, a good place to start is take the Adverse Childhood Experience Test over at my website, accessyourtruenature.com. You'll see it at the bottom of the page. Just see how high your score is, and you will get a free PDF document that really outlines some really good action steps for you to actually start really claiming your resilience and stepping into your power to know what you know and trust what you know is true, and love yourself back to living a deeply happy, fulfilled life. All right, guys, lots of love. Thank you for joining me. I always love having these conversations. Bye. Mwah.